I am Kathy Gradel, and John has heard this so many times, my day job is at SUNY in the College of Education. And then I do other stuff for fun and hobby and whatever. So I teach undergrads and grads. And then one of my sidebars is each fall now working with our first year seminar program, which is where this project emanated. So it's wonderful to work with 18-year-olds who know everything, because then there's very little that we need to do, right? I am so energized and challenged by them in every way. So this project came from an interest and need in stretching their skills in perhaps a more authentic way than sometimes we get to do in other projects. And then the other part of my life is with our Professional Development Center, which is equivalent to John's shop in a somewhat different way, probably more scaled down, and our Office of Online Learning. So I get to branch out and have fun. So I'm not sure if everybody sees it in the chat, but there's a bit.ly that you can go to if you want to. And I'm going to share my screen and make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it. I think that'll do it, yeah. So is that URL a little more visible there?
Yes.
Okay, so that's bit.ly, capital AR hyphen yikes. Always have to have a sense of humor when you're doing something brand new, right? So augmented reality, I told my students, Google it if you don't know what it is, and then we're going to experience it. But all I said is translate that word into Pokemon Go and you get it, right? And they all said, oh yeah, we get it. So we are augmenting our reality. We are not changing. We are adding to our reality with stuff. We are not changing the experience in dramatic ways as we would in virtual reality. I guess that's the easiest way that I did to translate it for them. But they got it with the Pokemon Go analogy. So let me talk to you about the launch point. First year seminar, end of the first semester, very end of the first semester, the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I was planning ahead in July and August for that point. I sometimes call it the point of no return. I don't know if you feel that, but when our students get back from Thanksgiving break, they think the semester is already over. And what is there to learn except get through exams? This course doesn't have an exam. So I wanted something that was more of a capstone experience, but would also serve to meet 4 what I consider non-negotiables. One is this seminar course is not one of those passport courses that says, get used to the campus, go visit these people, da-da-da-da. It's very skills-based. Students have a hard time generalizing from what it is that they're doing in the course, to be honest, to some of their other courses, because it's their first semester, because we are working on skills and sometimes soft skills that they don't understand the importance of. So it's not a passport program, but we wanted to use their campus connections in this capstone to get at some of the things that we were working on. And by that point, they were pretty familiar with things that were happening at campus. We also wanted to create a small service learning project, and that's what this was. So we also wanted to practice core skills, and those included things like thinking, writing, researching, reading, the basics. And also we wanted to hit on, good morning, the collaboration stuff that we had been working on. We did not make any assumptions about the skills and preferences of our students in doing meaningful small group work. So we had been working on that all year, or all semester. And we also were building on using our core Google apps. So Google Docs, slides, those kinds of things. We wanted something that wasn't going to kill anybody. So make it as efficient as possible and make it doable. And we wanted to have a little fun if we possibly could. This time of the year, it's really hard to talk about fun because people think that fun is going to happen on December 18th or whatever when they leave campus. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying these things about any of either our preferences or our mindsets or students. So we had a couple of goals that we wanted to do, and there were 3 unique sections. I taught 2 and a colleague taught 1. Most of our students are in our equal opportunity program just by how things happened this year. So we had several second language learners, several students who struggled from the outset, and several students who were already highly embedded in their professional programs because we have a heavy performance music program. Those guys were already well underway with what they were doing and what they were committed to. So we had a lot going on and a lot of goals, and we had so many choices. So I have, let me uncover myself down here. But we thought of having them do videos, elaborate curations of selfies, infographics, the inevitable slide deck, which they had already played with and had some success with, other kinds of curation tools. What I really wanted to do was have them create 360 images and plot them on Google Street View. I didn't win the camera that I wanted to, and I couldn't envision them really all following directions to take several, surround pictures to create their own little spheres. So I went to a conference. You all have experienced this, right? You go to a conference and you get an idea. So what I did is I went to our the ed tech team has a second year in a row. They do international trainings, but they're connected with one of our private campuses nearby. So they did a conference second year in a row on Google Apps for Education. I'm married to those apps, I think. My husband says I am. And I met a guy named Micah Shippi there at the conference in August. And it's a perfect venue for connecting with people that you've been following or stalking or whatever. And Mike is somebody that I've been kind of following because he's relatively local. He's in Rochester and he does neat things. So he's one of the trainers. And I explained what I was interested in doing. And he said, I will change your life. Come to my workshop. Although that's a very cool thing to think about, having them do individual points on the map, you will go crazy. And I'm going to give you some alternatives. And we're actually going to do it in 45 minutes in a session. So that efficiency button that I showed you was kind of driving me. And so what I want to do is take you to a couple of things that he used to convince us. Well, first of all, this is just the shout out that he gave us after we went through the project, his little post and tweet about what we did. But what he did is demo what he had done with his middle schoolers. Now, I am not underplaying at all the capabilities of our freshmen, but sometimes I did feel with our freshmen that we were actually back in middle school. So I didn't think this was a huge step back. What he had done is use this project, he's a social studies teacher, to have students map grave sites in one of their local cemeteries and get to the history of the famous people that were buried there. I don't teach social studies, but we are teaching social context on our campus. So I thought, well, that has some appeal. And what he did is he broke down the process. And what you can see in this picture is what happens when you're walking through, see the grave sites will pop up with little map drops here, and a little description will pop up saying who is buried here, what the deal was, about the relevance of that person to the local area or to international esteem. So the tail end of it, knowing what you're shooting for, looked right. It felt right. And having someone who was willing to tweet, email, talk on the phone, which we didn't have to get to, but to really be helpful was, such a wonderful thing as we were jumping into this. And I'm not a tech novice, but it was really, really comforting to be able to have that support. So let me see if I can get rid of me again. And what he did was create a recipe for doing it. So if you go to his site, which I'll put into the chat, he has a step-by-step Google Doc that walks you through pretty much every step of doing this project. So he calls it a DIY approach. And that is what he did with us at this, during this 45-minute session at the Google Summit. We did it mapping locations at Canisius Colleges, which is where the conference was held. So using both the documentation that he had provided, his example, and his wonderful support, we jumped into it. So let me take us back to where we are. So that's the Micah connection. And I can't say enough. I am sure that I am preaching to the choir here. And I'm not minimizing at all local talent, the people next door, your professional development center, or Center for Teaching and Learning, any of that. But sometimes getting that support from far and wide is A, convenient, and B, powerful. So I'm a big PLN advocate. Let's fill in the pieces. I'm going to take you through the steps that we followed using either demo versions of the docs and the pieces, or the real thing, okay? How am I doing? Do we have questions so far?
And Lisa, just jump in if you have any.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to get out of this view and start with a Google Doc. My students think that I don't sleep under the desk, that I sleep in a Google Doc, I think. And let me give you some context. So this is a plain old vanilla Google Doc with a little logo embedded in it that I built at canva.com, one of my very favorite images for non-visual arts people. And what I did is create a template that had the columns that related to the information that I wanted them to generate. Let me start over again. I created columns corresponding to the things that they needed to pop into it. This is a demo version, so I removed, I made a copy of the live doc, so you will not see the commenting that exists in the live doc, and I changed the identities of our students so that you wouldn't see that as well. So what I did is, before we started with this, I asked students to get together in the groups they wanted to work in. They couldn't be larger than 4. Each section had somewhere around 18, 20 students, and asked them to identify a chunk of a topic or a cluster or a name of things they would like to, that they thought would be important for future new people on campus, new students on campus, not necessarily first year, because we have incoming transfers, and we wanted it to be up and running for the spring term. So sports areas, music areas, great places to eat. How do you stay healthy? Where do you get academic support? So I gave them some ideas of topics. They then went to work in face-to-face in the classroom to identify those clusters, and then they generated their list of places that they wanted to go to and divided them up amongst themselves. After they did that, each person had the responsibility for filling in the first two columns. What are your names and what did you pick? We wanted to make sure that what they picked wasn't so redundant that we all ended up going to the place that they like to eat, okay? Because we wanted as many map points that made sense as possible. So that's all that happened in class. I teach in a class that has literally a whiteboard that you use markers on and a movable teacher station that I plug my laptop into. And they walk in with all their computers in their cargo pockets. So they all have their phones in their pants. And so they pull out their phones and somebody in the group or all of them input stuff into their Google Doc. It had taken us most of the semester to make sure they had Google Apps loaded on their phone as well as all their cool things that they wanted. But we were at that point because we were at the end of the semester. When they left, they had about half of a week to plug the other three columns worth of information in. So write a summary, find other supports that are hyperlinked, and find where that thing is using your phone and a geolocation indicator. So we wanted them to do that actually right before they left for break and then come back and do the fine-tuning. And as happens with many things before any break, some of it got done and some of it didn't, to be totally honest. So what you're seeing here is more of the semi-finished version of what people plugged into the doc. Most people did not have the last column filled in because they were not interested in following directions, did not know how to do it, or otherwise were unable to find the location of their site. So when we came back and took a look at this framework that wasn't done yet, the sandbox, we asked for all the geeks in the room to stand up with their phones and find a friend who did not know how to do this and take their phones, leave class, go find the site, and find this information for each of the sites that they had located. Luckily, and we use Geeks in a positive way, luckily there were enough geeks who raised their hand and grabbed a partner and went exploring. They also got food on the way, drinks on the way, did the fun things that you do during a non-break in class, but that was okay because as they did it, they plotted the information that was missing. And that's what I was shooting for. It was well worth half of the class and the classes are relative. I teach an 80-minute class twice a week. These courses are blended at certain points, so this was a week when they were supposed to work virtually for half of the time and then come to class once a week. So it's well worth about half an hour to get them out there and doing this. So being a sandbox, it was a place where we could draft stuff and then work on it. And the next step was for students to peer review and use the commenting feature in Google Docs to, within their teams, and you'll see, let me skim back up. This team was the Arts and Rockefeller Arts Center. So that team had responsibility for picking who they were going to stalk, meaning who they were going to review and edit, but they didn't edit, they used the commenting feature in Docs to provide input to their colleague to refine what they had written. They were looking for signs of plagiarism, which we had worked on during class. Did somebody copy and paste so much from a source that they were plagiarizing. They were looking for information that was relevant potentially to, so usability, to future students. And they were looking to make sure that the stuff that was in all the columns was accurate. So it was a pretty simple, but a pretty simple peer review process. Every student received graded points for commenting on their colleagues' work. And this is a process we have been using all semester because we feel that that's part of the collaborative experience. You own it, but you also need to know what to do with feedback, which is a challenge for us with many of our first year students. So, any questions about that phase? So we're a Google Apps campus, and what I did, just the back end of this, is create 3 versions of this, one for each section, because I didn't want 60 kids interacting at this point with these docs. So I only had maximum 20 kids interacting with each doc, and then the main interactions were within their 4-person team. And everybody gets editing rights, and this was shared within our Fredonia domain to anyone in Fredonia with the link to edit. And we've been doing this kind of thing all semester long with more or less success, sometimes not 100% success. And then I just posted the links to our learning management system. So I didn't even send emails to the teams. I just said, you know, the section 6's doc is here, section 7 docs is here, and Dr. Rivera's section is here. So that was the strategy for distribution. Okay, next step. Let's see, can I remember the next step? The next step involved, after they had fine edited things, we had an instructional area that's not a computer lab, but has the flexibility to become one in our library. So there are rolling tables and a laptop cart and whatever. So what we did is the last week of class, we converged there, and we had teams go out and verify the information. As we had a geek from each team become the mapper for that team's mapping points. So it was, if you walked in, you would think, what is this woman doing in this crazy session? We had some people who were working on back work for their final project. We had some people going out verifying some map points that didn't look quite right. Like we had somebody saying that one of the learning center areas was out in the middle of Central Avenue. So we had some things that we needed to fix, and I didn't want to fix them. I wanted them to realize what they needed to do. So we had a traveling team that went out to actually get points if they wanted to, and then we had, or if we needed to, and then we had a geek team back at the maps doing things. So here's the map. So this looks familiar, right? Looks like any old Google map, which it kind of is. But what I did is created a map, named it, and shared the link so that all of our geeks, and remember there's about, in each section, there's 4 or 5 geeks. So they are interacting with this document at the same time, but only one doc. So what their job was to add, and I'm just going to do this to show you, was to add a marker think I'm going to do it. Okay, so maybe I'm not. This is the preview version probably. But add a marker and then add information that corresponded to it. So let me give you an example. So what they would do is plug the map point in and then go to the Google Doc, copy the information right here into the editing window for the map point. And then they would add the link or links that their colleague had put in to that third column over and paste it in here and click Save. If they wanted to get fancy, and some of them did, and they had to paste in the map point. If they wanted to get fancy, they could customize the icon either by linking to an existing image or choosing from the icons that are already available in Google Maps. Initially, most of them didn't do that. They just plugged the information in and hoped that everything was going to get done really quickly. You can see, though, that after the fact, some of them, actually you can't see that this happened after, but many of them went back after the fact and did some tweaking by adding images, or if they got an alert from a friend that something was wrong, they went back in and edited after that class. So that gives us an interesting, there's my point. Sometimes it takes a little bit. So I might type in Central Avenue, blah, 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 and paste my stuff in here. I can add a picture, etc. And I don't know if you've worked with Google Maps. It has a very easy learning curve. It can be a little quirky at times, but a pretty easy learning curve. Okay. And this is out in the middle of somewhere, so it's not exactly right. We did have students initially just going to Google Maps, instead of taking their phone to the location, going to Google Maps and eyeballing where they thought that thing was on campus, and then pasting that, that location into the Google Docs sandbox, and it would end up out in the middle of nowhere, like mine. But what was great is people would say, "Are you really there?" And then we had interesting conversations because a lot of the sites were actually in our library, and they found that the sites overlapped each other. And so they would say, "Are you sure that the Read Library Reference Desk, which they love because they get easy answers, are you sure that's in the same location as the Learning Center?" So we're standing in the library in that room I described, and I looked up and I said, "Let's see, here we are. Here's the 4th floor, which is where the Learning Center is. Think about where you get off the elevator down here and up there. Are they anywhere near each other?" And they went like this. "They're on top of us." So there was an interesting aha about a little bit about how geolocation works. So that's what they did, with all kinds of reminders that, guess what, this is going to be viewable by anybody, and this isn't the last piece. So, so the next thing that you do is you take that map, whatever is on it, and you export it as a KML file. Okay, and that's, the 3 little dots that now tell us to go and get all these other bennies in anything Google. So we export it to KML and download it somewhere. So I'm downloading it to my computer on my desktop. So what we have is a fully functional Google map that you can share with anybody. What you do is you you give them the preview, you give them the version that you want shared, okay? So you give them that link, not the editable link. And then you have this other file. And what are we going to do with that file? So we're going to go to something called Wikitude. My husband says I like things because of their names, you know, like the name of the beer or the name of whatever. And I love Wikitude just because of the name. No. So Micah said, go to Wikitude and pretend you're a developer. So they have these free, they have paid for, but they also have free development tools. And this is your dashboard. It's not elaborate. It's not beautiful or anything. But what you do is this is like so empowering. You are creating worlds and you're creating things that have meaning in those worlds. So you can see I have several worlds. I have a world for my dog, Tucker, and all of his favorite places. I have a world for our different sections. I have a world for my favorite spots in the building where my office is. I did these other things because I wanted to test and test and test before I went live with the kids. And I know that you're like that as well when you're trying something new. So I would send the information about the app to friends and say, walk around Thompson Hall, I'm not there. What pops up when you walk by cha-cha? And test it on your phone because I have an Android, whatever. So I did a fair amount of that. So I'll just open up a world that I have, which is Gradle, my map, so that you can see what you have to do. So you have to name it, do a little description. The hardest part about this, it is so funny, is inserting the images in the size that they want for the worlds. And I know that's probably pretty silly, but when the phone app opens up, it actually shows the name of the thing plus an image. So what I would do is upload my file. Now I already have one uploaded. So I would upload that. And then I would pick the category, and then a required element of posting to Wikitude is to upload a world icon or use one of theirs, and a world icon in two formats. So I have a generic icon for all of my worlds, and then I have a unique icon for each of the worlds that I have. So I use that very same image that I created for our other docs and that you saw on the slideshow. I use that as the icon. So the hardest part is making sure it's the right size because it wants it to be 512 by 512. Honestly, that is the hardest part. So you upload it and then you wait for something to happen, but nothing happens because this thing is going to live on your phone. So are we okay with that so far? You got a map, you save it as a KML file, you go over to Wikitude because it has a cool name, you upload it, you fill in the blanks, and then you're ready to go, and nothing happens until you go get the app on your phone. So Wikitude is available on multiple operating systems. And what I want to do then is show you what it looks like in action. So the very last day of class, which is for me always a pizza party. It doesn't matter what class it is. Sometimes we eat pizza as well in the meantime, but I make them do things like create a Google form to figure out what kind of pizza I need to order. And they do it because they're going to get pizza. I'm trying to make a little bit of authenticity, right? So we always have pizza. And this semester with this group of people, we also went around and tried out the app and got extra credit for all the pictures we took and videos we took. So little teeny brownie points at the end always work. So these are some of my very favorite views of what happened, and it'll show you what happens with the app. What do I learn from this? First year students love to take pictures of each other and themselves. We knew this from the beginning, but I couldn't entice them to do selfies for other projects, and I was very happy about this. So you can see Elizabeth holding out her phone, and Brittany doing her spiel, doing herself, right? So this is what actually it looks like on your telephone, on your phone when you're walking around. So as students are approaching Rosh Hall, if that's one of the map points, it will pop up and have the name of it. And if you want to, you can go to the list view to take a look at what are the things that are in the app. This is just an example of the map. So the steps to doing that are to go to your device store, find Wikitude, again, because it is a cool name, and then search for the app based on what you know about it. So our course is called Fred 101. As soon as they started to type in Fred, they would find it. And then R stands for Rivera, G stands for Gradle. We are in the midst of combining them into one right now so that it is really functional for the whole campus. But for now, what we did is divide things into our two sections. So download the app, and this is something that I did for their celebration, so it has all kinds of things. And this is what kids did on that last day of class. They took their phones, they took videos, and they gathered images of the things working. And some of the videos are amazing. They go like this, "It's working!" and stuff like that. So here's an example of a view from one team in the library. The library, as I mentioned, was a very popular area because, number one, they spent a lot of time in it. They eat and drink in it all the time. And a lot of our student supports are in and around the library, like our registrar is right in the library. Our learning center is in the library. And so what it does is it pops up and allows you to click on it. If you have Google Maps installed on your phone, it will actually take you on a route to that location. So you don't have to do that, but using the map view, it will help you to do that. And then because we were having a semi-blizzard one that last day, I was giving extra brownie points if you took outdoor pictures in the snow. So I got a fair number of outdoor pictures, including wet phones that I hope I don't get charged for. So here's an example of students outside heading toward, and I'm looking, Maidam Hall, and you probably can't read this, but this says radio station, and it's telling us that we're headed toward the radio station. And again, the closer we get, then the meters or feet, some of them had not set their phones to feet versus meters. So that was an interesting discussion. Why does it say M? What's a meter? We don't have many Canadians in our first year class. So that was interesting. And then we got a lot of group shots and selfies and whatever. When they came back to eat pizza, and I had the pizza delivery time so that they could go out, try everything to make sure they were ready, because at the end of that week, their job was to teach all the rest of the freshmen who were not in our sections how to use the app at a celebration that we had. So I wanted to make sure that everybody could do it, might do it, was interested in doing it, and had fun doing it. So these are just some of the shots of what they did. So that's what they did. it was an interesting way to ask them to, let me go back to the, where do I want to go? It's an interesting way to have them use almost practice skills that we had been working on all semester without appearing to be practicing them. You get my drift? It's like not a test, but it was a test. Can we do this efficiently? Can we do it without a whole lot of prodding from me? Can we do it with the energy from your groups? Can we produce a final product that other people may want to use and could be functional for them to use? So to review, these were the steps. Let me go into present mode. First, we got our heads together. Let me make this little. That's the planning phase where we go, who's going to do what are my responsibilities? By the way, the directions for this are in a Google Doc, highly detailed so that they can go step by step by step. They hated it and loved it all at the same time, but they were used to it by this point in the semester. They had to find the location and they had to write about it without plagiarizing. Then they were supposed to walk and check and make sure that all the locations were correct before they went into step 4, which was the peer review phase. Now, as I mentioned, we ended up merging the walk and check and peer review because everyone didn't get their work done either accurately or on time. So we were looping through that. They had about about less than 48 hours to fine tune their work after they got feedback from their peers before the Geeks put the information into the Google Map. That was a tight timeline at that point in the year, but it was a relevant way for them to practice using feedback, which continues to be a major issue with many of our students. The 6th step is the geek maps the stuff, and then everyone checks the map, or the geeks check the map, and then I made the app. So my roles were kind of like the coach, cheerleader, and pizza orderer. And also I had to have enough confidence and practice with each of the components so that if I needed to, I felt that I needed to, I could chime in. I tried so hard to make sure that the geeks became the coaches in the groups about everything. So my role was to make sure that the map was shared, that it was exported, that I made the app, and then that I shared that information about how to get the app and use it. So this is what happened. On that last day of class, one of the pre-work items was to walk in with Wikitude on your phones. And so one student out of each group had the Wikitude app on their phone. As students entered, I reminded them we were having pizza as soon as they used the app, and was the app on their phone. So as they were sitting down, they were downloading the app. And then we used it and we celebrated. So those are the steps all done in a matter of, I would say, 2.5-ish weeks during the time when they are studying for exams, maybe, and when we are wrapping up the course. So I think it was a good start. It was definitely different. And it let us use stuff, meaning skills, that we had been rehearsing, trying to continue building, etc., all the way along. Not the mapping skills, the planning, organizing, collaborating, writing, etc., those skills. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask if we have questions.
For locations like the libraries or the art center, where you have multiple locations of interest within the same building, is it possible to fine tune that to get those different altitudes?
Yes.
It is? Okay.
Yes. And we did not. I don't know how fine-tuned the app itself is, because what it does is we're using the free version. There is a much more elegant version that would have, instead of map points popping out literally, it could be an avatar of the librarian popping out at the reference desk, which would be so cool. Can't wait to do this with a real tech, I'm going to put in air quotes, a real technology class. But yes, there's a lot of fine tuning that can go on both within the app, especially if you pay for something a little more elegant, even at Wikitude. Yes.
Thank you.
Great question.
Lisa or Amy, do you have any questions?
Seems like a fantastic project.
It does. I could see it being a lot of areas. And for a freshman class, I could see that creating more connections to the community and getting them out exploring too, which is a nice project just for that purpose too.
There could have been fisticuffs in that first Heads Together session, because one of the things we saw them doing was, you can't have that point, you guys over there, we're taking it because it fits better here, right? And I want to show you something that I personally, I don't know whether this is for suck up points or whatever, but let me show you one of the things that they put into their, you know, I think our provost, when she sees this, is gonna just, she hasn't seen it yet, but one of the points that, what do I want to do? I want to get out of this and show you this picture. I hope my dog doesn't bark right now, but he's hearing something. So can you see that picture? That's my office door. So one of the map points is know your advisor's office and your instructor's office and when they're on campus and how you can reach them when they're not on campus. And I said, how are you going to put that into a map point? And they said, oh, we've taken care of that. We've mapped your office door. And I said, you have made my day, week, and year. And what's on my office door, which they aren't showing in this picture, is my schedule is a paper schedule, but there's a QR code on it that takes you, if you scan it in, takes you to the weekly schedule that I change online, so they know where I potentially am every week as it may change. So they had gotten used to that. I'm surprised they didn't show that. But so they actually, some of them were really creative about taking where we go for help or what we do, whatever, and picking an example of it that wasn't an actual, straight location, and writing that in. And I thought that was, well, it was my office store. How happy can an instructor be, right? So, and I don't think that they hated it. Some of them loved it. We had 100% compliance, and which is an amazing thing considering the hit rate with some of our other projects. And we actually had people by that point in the semester and with this project in that commenting phase, making meaningful comments, not just like go bro, or anything like that. Doing stuff like, are you sure this is the best? Are your points accurate? I mean, I felt like they were mini me's running around at that point. And this looks plagiarized. Can you double check to make sure that this is paraphrased from what's on the website? And I'm like this, yes. So I would do it again. I think I would try to start it a little bit earlier because they still felt pressured even though there wasn't a lot of output needed. However, the momentum of the end of the semester carried us well through this project. In the old days in courses, I used to plan the digital story that they were doing, the podcast or whatever for the last couple of weeks. So some kind of a multimedia thing that kind of changed the subject and got them applying stuff. So this has that same flavor, but I think a lot more meaning. When they were showing their colleagues who were not in our classes, this it was fun. It was fun and energizing. So I think that's the key. So thank you.
Well,
A
thank
lot of
you.
moving parts, but I think very doable.
It looks like it worked beautifully.